In the world of archaeological science, there is a fundamental rule that serves as a gatekeeper for the truth. You cannot radiocarbon date metal. It is a physical impossibility. Metal is inorganic. It does not breathe, it does not consume, and therefore it does not die. It holds no biological clock. But you can date what is hidden inside it. If an object made of advanced alloy, seamless, machined, and precise, contains organic material sealed within its core, that organic material becomes a timestamp, a message in a bottle. Recently, a specific set of data points emerged from a secure laboratory that shouldn't exist. The object in question is known as the Buga sphere. When images of it first hit the internet, the skeptics called it industrial debris. The believers called it a probe. But when researchers at the University of Georgia finally looked inside the molecular structure of the material trapped within it, the conversation stopped being about what the object looked like and started being about when it came from. The number on the screen didn't point to the modern aerospace industry. It pointed to the end of the last ice age. This is the story of the vault that should have been silent and the discovery that refuses to fit into history. Long before the sterile lights of a laboratory, the mystery began in the open air. The location was Buga, Colombia, a quiet region of agriculture and low hills where the sky is usually the domain of drifting clouds and the occasional crop duster. Residents here are accustomed to familiar aerial shapes, gliders, weather balloons, commercial drones. But on the morning the sphere appeared, the witnesses knew immediately that this did not belong to the catalog of known objects. It didn't drift, it didn't float with the wind. According to a local school teacher, it moved with sharp intent. It cut a geometric line across the sky, stopped, and then pivoted with a mechanical crispness that defied the inertia of a balloon. A farmer noted that it glinted in the sun like polished mercury, reflecting the world without distortion. When the object eventually came down, whether it crashed or landed remains a point of contention, it was recovered. The first smartphone clips were shaky and pixelated, sparking the usual online firestorm. Debunkers immediately flagged it as a compressor tank or a satellite fuel cell. It was a logical assumption. Space junk falls to Earth every day. But as the object was transported and the first high-resolution photographs emerged, the debris theory began to fracture. Debris has seams. Debris has rivets, weld lines, stamped serial numbers, and valves. The Buga sphere was unnervingly smooth. Under macro-lens photography, the surface appeared continuous, as if it hadn't been assembled from parts, but grown or cast as a single unit. There were faint markings, geometric patterns that looked less like surface etching and more like they were part of the metallurgy itself, visible only when the light hit at a specific oblique angle. And then there were the holes. To the naked eye, they were invisible, but under magnification, the surface was perforated by tiny, microscopic apertures. They were perfectly round, spaced on a grid that suggested mathematical deliberation. One analyst described them as needle holes on a perfect coordinate system. It was these holes that transformed the sphere from a curiosity into a contradiction, because deep inside those microscopic tunnels, protected from the elements and sealed by the metal itself, was a residue, a biological resin. And unlike metal, resin has a ghost. It has carbon. And if it has carbon, it has a date. The University of Georgia's Center for Applied Isotope Studies is not a place for speculation. It is a facility of cold, hard measurement. They deal in mass spectrometry, in the decay of isotopes, in the absolute certainty of atomic half-lives.
When the samples arrived, the atmosphere in the lab was professional but tense. The chain of custody was rigorous. The resin samples sat in small, labeled vials, amber-colored flakes that looked deceptively ordinary, like aged honey or petrified sap. A technician, let's call him Hale, began the preparation. In this line of work, contamination is the enemy. If a single skin cell or a breath of modern carbon touches the sample, the data is ruined. Hale moved with the slow, deliberate precision of a bomb disposal expert. The resin was treated with an acid-base acid wash to strip away any modern environmental pollutants, isolating the original carbon structure. Across the room, Dr. Marquez, a senior analyst with decades of experience dating everything from charcoal hearths to Pleistocene bone fragments, watched the calibration logs.
The mass spectrometer doesn't care about UFO theories. It doesn't care about Colombian farmers or internet rumors. It only answers one question: how much carbon-14 remains? It's a countdown clock that starts ticking the moment an organism dies. The less C14 left, the older the sample. The machine engaged, the room filled with that specific, heavy silence that only exists in labs and hospitals. The team wasn't looking for aliens. They were expecting a date from the last few decades, perhaps a resin used in 1970s aerospace insulation or a modern synthetic polymer. When the preliminary results appeared on the monitor, Dr. Marquez didn't gasp. She didn't shout. She simply leaned in, adjusted her glasses, and checked the calibration again. Then she looked at Hale. The numbers were stark. The resin was not modern. It was not from the Industrial Revolution. It wasn't even from the time of the Roman Empire. The age estimate centered around 12,560 years before present. To put that number into perspective, this resin formed during the Younger Dryas. This was the late Pleistocene. It was a time of violent climatic shifts when the great ice sheets were melting, sea levels were rising, and humanity consisted of hunter-gatherers using stone tools. The Great Pyramid of Giza wouldn't be built for another 8,000 years. And yet, this organic material was extracted from the precise machined boreholes of a metallic sphere thousands of years before humans discovered how to smelt iron. Interpretation is a dangerous game, but data demands an explanation. This is where the narrative moved out of the lab and into the public sphere. Dr. Stephen Greer, a prominent and controversial ufologist, brought these findings to the world stage. He framed the paradox that the scientists were too cautious to articulate. If the sphere was a modern hoax, why use resin from the Ice Age? If the resin is genuine, how did it end up inside a manufactured titanium alloy object thousands of years before humans discovered how to smelt iron? Greer argued that the object represents a technological anachronism, something that is out of time and out of place. As the story gained traction, the atmosphere around the investigation began to shift. It wasn't just data anymore, it was a complication. While the lab finalized the report, a disturbing rumor began to circulate through the research team. It started with a message about an attempted visit. Men dressed in police uniforms had reportedly approached the facility where the sphere was initially held, demanding access. But there was no record of a dispatch, no warrant, no paper trail. The men carried themselves with the arrogance of authority, but when challenged by facility security for documentation, they withdrew. It's a story we hear often in these cases: the cleanup crew, the silencers. Whether it was a genuine bureaucratic mix-up or something more calculated, the effect was immediate. Dr. Marquez met with administrators. Security protocols were tightened. The chain of custody documentation was duplicated and stored off-site. The team realized that they weren't just studying a geological sample. They were handling evidence in a trial that the public wasn't allowed to see. The Buga sphere sits in that uncomfortable gray zone of science. The debunkers want it to be space debris, but they can't explain the absence of welding seams or the 12,000-year-old biological markers. The believers wanted to be extraterrestrial, a probe sent to monitor the cataclysms of the younger Dryas, but the object remains silent, offering no radio signals, no lights, only its impossible existence. Back in the vault, under the cold hum of the climate control, the object waits. One of the younger analysts, after staring at the object for hours, whispered a comment that resonated with the entire team. He said, "It looks like a safe, but we've lost the combination."
The radiocarbon dating is accurate. The resin is ancient. The metal is machined. These are the facts. How you connect them depends on what you are willing to believe. Is it possible that human civilization is older and more advanced than we accept? Did a forgotten terrestrial culture master metallurgy during the Ice Age? Or is the Buga a visitor, a piece of technology left behind by an observer who watched our ancestors struggle through the freezing cold of the Pleistocene? The numbers don't lie, but they also don't tell us the whole story. They only tell us that our timeline is missing a chapter. Until we find a way to open the sphere, or until we find another one, we are left with the unease of knowing that the history books are incomplete. What do you think? Is the Buga a relic of a lost human civilization or evidence of off-world technology? And why would 12,000-year-old organic matter be sealed inside a machine? Review the evidence in the description below. If you want to keep exploring the mysteries that science is afraid to touch, make sure you're subscribed. The truth is usually older than we think.